Previously on Reading in Church and Other Distractions.
Ready to do Psalm 119?
I'm just going to reflect on Leviticus.
We sit here quietly. Take a moment. We can some directed meditation, I guess.
Center ourselves.
They could probably pause the podcast if they want to do that.
You know what? Let's do that. Let's go your route. That has a lot to commend it. Okay. Oh, so we move on to...
I just have to tell you real quick that when I put my lectures on YouTube, of course, when I flipped my classroom, and I was studying how to do this in the early days and how you make a good video, and there was actually a video of the bad example of what you shouldn't do in a video. Somebody in their video shows the question and then says, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to think on that, and walks out of frame and just lets the thing record while you're staring at the screen. And the point was, they could probably pause it if they need more time.
It would be worse if he stayed in screen.
That's true. If he just stands there awkwardly staring at you. No, he stepped off the screen, thankfully. But yeah,
checked his email.
So I'm just saying we probably don't need to go that route. We can let them pause the podcast if they need to.
Yeah, you can pause that. We're going to go on at this point.
Catch up with us in a minute.
To an OCD celebration of Torah. Part 2 or 3. We're out here.
We're in there.
Psalm, or otherwise known as Psalm 119.
Welcome to Reading in Church and Other Distractions with Rob and Mike.
Please note the following fun fact. The following fascinating and inspirational podcast on Transfiguration Sunday is actually on, get this, next year's texts. Same themes, wrong texts. What a rookie mistake. This will make a great story someday.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. It is Transfiguration Sunday, and I am Robert Wallace.
And I am Michael McKeever. And have you been in an auto accident? We are personal injury.
Is that what it is? Are you injured? Do you want to be injured? Do you know anyone who's injured? Do you know who wants to be injured?
I think I've been seeing a lot of those commercials.
Oh, really? Is that what it sounded like when we did this?
Have you been in an audio?
Hi. Well, thanks. So much for our professional sounding podcast. We went off the rails pretty early, just right after the introduction today, it seems.
I got a few syllables out and left the track.
So just a reminder before we get into our text today, make sure and like our page on Facebook, Reading in Church. And if you listen to us on iTunes, make sure and leave a review of the podcast if you enjoy it.
We do have a Gmail address, readinginchurch at gmail.com.
Nice. Give
us a shout out. Ask us a question and connect with us. We want to find out if people are out there or not.
We did have a Twitter question this week.
Did we?
Yeah, that was people wondering if we could read a different translation every now and then.
I saw that. And I failed to print out a different translation.
So we just went with the same translation.
Why? Did they want us to read those out loud?
I know.
Because we do in our own time.
That's true. That's true in other places. But so that was just one suggestion that we've completely ignored at this point.
Air.
So,
and they had a specific version? Was it the...
No, I don't know that. Maybe they did mention the Contemporary English Bible. Yeah.
Common English or Contemporary English?
Common English, yeah. I actually enjoy the Contemporary English version. But
I have a New Testament version of that.
I don't have a full Bible of that either.
Yeah.
Is there a full Bible of that?
I think that's the free one they gave to
That's the free one they gave to us to try and make us buy a Bible?
Right.
I didn't do that.
Right.
Marketing didn't work on me on that one. So,
and I'm New Testament.
So this is Transfiguration Sunday, which is exciting for me because I still am not sure about the Transfiguration. So I'm hoping that you can, make it all clear for me about what's the point when we get to the Transfiguration. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that, to getting all my questions answered
one
today.
Thing I didn't glance at this week. We'll make something up. Right?
I'm not.
We are professional mansplainers.
That's true.
By trade.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have gone that way. But I've said as with a PhD, I could do 15 minutes on nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's often it's I have no idea about the question. But having said that, let me give you 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Earn my keep here.
So do we want to start with
I got to read.
Old Testament?
Transfiguration Sunday. Mm-hmm. Yes, the transfiguration of Elijah here.
Well, I'm guessing. He's being I believe this technically is the assumption of Elijah.
Okay.
He's being assumed into heaven.
Yes, it's not assumed too much here. All right, so I'm reading 2 Kings 2, 1 through 12.
Yep.
Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, spoiler alert.
Spoiler. We see how this is going to go.
As they boarded the doomed ship Titanic, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, I'm going to ask you questions about those companies of prophets.
I'm good.
Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you? As the narrator spoke. And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." I'm not sure what the tone should be. You can help me with that.
I'm probably snarky. I don't know. A little frustrated.
I'm the main guy.
Hush.
Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of the prophets also went and stood at some distance from them as they were both standing by the Jordan. Then Elisha took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other, until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted to you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. Wow. Yep. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a pretty, that's a lot going on there.
Yes. I love this passage. I really do. It's a favorite.
Because you can just be reading along Kings for a while, and
right.
it's like, it's not this much excitement in one paragraph. That's a lot.
Yep. And this, a couple of important points, it's the chariot of fire that separates them.
Yeah.
But it's the whirlwind that takes Elijah into heaven. So he doesn't get to ride in the chariot of fire. Apparently it was the draft from the chariot of fire as it went blowing past that sucked him up into, I guess.
Oh, is that what that is?
I don't know.
Okay.
But the word whirlwind is the word for, it can be tornado. It can be, it can be we always, in the movies, it's always the gentle rising ascent into heaven, but it could be a quick one.
Yeah, no, this sounds pretty vigorous.
Yeah. So
a whirlwind. So is the whirlwind, is it fiery also, or is it just?
I believe that the nature of the whirlwind is left as somewhat ambiguous. So
scholars and churches disagree. And
there have been a number of denominations that have split over the issue of the whirlwind, but no, I don't know anything. That's probably not the focus of this passage, though. For us, is the nature of the whirlwind.
Okay.
Do you want to ask a question? You want me to start talking? Because
there's so much to talk about. It's probably don't have any time for my fake questions. So let's just jump right to the cut to the chase.
I'm fascinated by the fact that Elijah keeps telling Elisha to hold off.
Yeah.
And stay. And what's also interesting is that you mentioned these company of prophets, and the company of prophets are speaking something that is going to take place. They are correct when they speak it. And in the Old Testament, the only way to tell a true prophet from a false prophet is if their word happens. And so we know that these are true prophets. Right. And we know it because the narrator told us at the beginning that Elijah's about to be taken up in a whirlwind. Right. So we know that these are good guys. These are not the fake Baal prophets. These are not. These are good prophets of the Lord that are speaking true words here.
There's a lot of them.
And there's a lot of them. And Elijah's telling him, you can stay, you could get work here. There's obviously jobs for prophets here in this area.
I didn't know what that
I think that's what it is. You can come and stay and live here and do pretty well for yourself.
Okay.
But I got to go on to, and Elisha refuses. He's not going to stay with these company of unnamed prophets. He's going to keep walking. And he gets the several opportunities to get off the road, and he just won't do it. He stayed committed to Elijah, stays committed to Elijah. And then even goes further, and not only is he not going to join this community of unnamed prophets, he asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And this is an inheritance reference.
Yeah.
So it's not, he's not saying I want to be twice as good as you. He's saying that, whenever the oldest son in the rules of inheriting, the oldest son gets 2/3 of the estate, and all the other children split the remaining third.
Right.
And so the oldest son gets the double portion, right? He becomes the patriarch. And Elisha is asking Elijah, let me be your successor.
Right.
Let me be the one who stands up to kings. Let me be the one who goes and risks my life. And so not only is he not wanting to be an unnamed prophet, he's saying, I'm right behind you, man. I'm going to go ahead and follow all the way to the end. So
hence you have asked a hard thing.
Right, exactly. You have asked being a prophet is a hard thing. So
I want to go and be fed by crows out in the wilderness.
Right.
And doubt everything.
Right. It's going to be hard. So I've so much about this text, but I'm fascinated, first of all, by Elisha's willingness to keep going. He's been given several opportunities to get off the road and have an easier life, quite frankly. I mean, you can get work and not have to stand up to kings and do terrible things.
Well, what did these other prophets do?
Well, there were a number of prophets around. There were court prophets, and they probably might have had some municipal function.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to know. I mean, it's really hard to know what they exactly
would
would
these
have
have
done.
been under Elijah? Are these like the fruit of his ministry?
Maybe,
or something?
maybe they're, if not, they're at least true prophets. I mean, the one thing we can say about them is they're speaking a true word from God. So this is not speaking down Baal prophets like Elijah has done in the past and cut their heads off.
Yeah.
This is a group of folks who are speaking for Yahweh. So you can hang out here. This is a good place. You could make a life here. It'd be easier for you to stay on this road here. And I think on some level that would be okay. I mean, we talk a lot about God's will for my life, and I think that there's a couple of ways a will can go sometimes. I think we have options in the choices we make that God works out with us. I think Elisha had an option here. You can go ahead and live here, and maybe we won't remember your name and know anything about you, where you came from, but it'll be a whole lot easier than having to follow in my footsteps and speak up to kings. And but
isn't that
he says I'm in it all the way to the end.
Well, I can't say his name. Kazanstakis' temptation of the Christ is to have a normal life,
right?
To be tempted by having a normal life.
But see, I don't think it would be a sin for Elisha to stay, personally. No. I mean, he's had his mentor tell him to stay. He's had a company of prophets show that they were prophets of the Lord. I don't think Elisha is being, a mother. No, that's fine. You go ahead and stay here. I'm going to go on to Gilgal. That's okay.
Reminds
I'll
me
be
a little
fine.
bit of Ruth.
That's true.
Persistence,
That's true.
No, I'm not leaving you.
I'm not leaving you. I'm staying with you to the end. Yeah. Would it have been wrong for Ruth to go home? I don't think so.
No.
But we wouldn't probably know her
name.
name.
It's kind of saying something commendable about their character.
It is.
I think.
Mm-hmm. That he's willing to endure the hard call of being a prophet.
Plus, my name is almost exactly like yours.
Well, it's spelled a little different in Hebrew, but in English it's hard.
It's hard to say that.
Elisha.
Careful.
Yeah, it is a little harder in English. Yeah. But for me, this has always been sort of an encouraging story at seeing that, there's a lot of ways your life can go, and you can go the easier, quiet life, I suppose, but you're never going to see the waters part and the chariots burn and the winds blow.
Right.
Or you can do the hard thing, but it's going to be pretty miraculous if you do the hard thing. So, I mean, I guess I've seen that calling in my life a time or two, and, where I felt like I could get off of a hard call and it would be okay, and it would be better. It'd be ordinary, but it would be fine. And then instead I, tried to do a harder thing. And it's been great. Because here I am now on this podcast at the pinnacle of my career.
In the Midwest. Somewhere.
So.
I take the words right out of my mouth. This guy, Elijah, he has some flair, both in style, how he dresses, right? The big belt and the furry coat.
The belt is really the thing.
And then the exit, it's like, man,
that's true.
He's got a certain panache and flair.
Okay. I wasn't going to tell the story, but I always tell the story when I teach it in class, when I teach this passage in class. Years ago, I have a colleague of mine who reports this as happening to her friend. So this is not and she's a reliable source. This is not anecdotal. This is apparently a legitimate story, actually happened. But this New Testament colleague of mine had a dear friend in her church that had always wanted to go and see a passion play.
Okay, this story.
And so,
this is a good story.
Thank you. And so she saved her money. She went to this passion play. I don't remember where it was. I don't know if it was Eureka Springs. It may have just been, a local one. But wherever she went, she said it was beautiful, right? They go through the whole thing, the life of the last week of Jesus, and Jesus is crucified, and Father, into your hands I commit thy spirit and my spirit, and the soldier stabs him. And unfortunately, the retractable spear didn't retract. The guy literally stabs Jesus on the cross, who then screams because he's been stabbed. So Jesus, who just died, has now screamed, "Ah! He stabbed me! He really stole my bleeding! Get me down!"
In Aramaic,
no, I think it was English. And so they take Jesus off the cross.
It's so real.
And they seek medical attention for him. And then they put Jesus's understudy on the cross to continue the music. So when I first heard the story, I said, wow, a Gnostic crucifixion. How exciting. You don't normally see those. But so they go back through, and she said, we were just suspending our disbelief. We'd just gotten back into it. Jesus has been resurrected. He's met with the disciples. They've had dinner, rode to Emmaus, and then he goes to ascend into heaven. And unfortunately, the weights for the crane were set for primary Jesus and not understudy Jesus.
Okay. Yeah.
And understudy Jesus was 30 pounds lighter than primary Jesus. So when Jesus was supposed to slowly ascend into heaven, the crane whipped him through the sky as he goes screaming, flying into the sky. So I always ask, how do you, if you're the angel, say, as you have seen him go, you will one day see him return screaming back to earth. Yeah. But I always imagine Elijah now when he ascends into heaven, screaming into heaven as he goes with that flair that you're talking about.
That guy he knew how to do an entrance and an exit.
Boy, that guy could leave. Boy, that was amazing. So.
Well, this reminds me of certainly the ascension of Jesus.
Right. Sure.
And that as you see him, as you mentioned, as you see him go, he shall return. And so, it's hard for me to almost primarily read this through the gospel stories. There's so many echoes.
Of course. Well, and this because Elijah doesn't die, right. that develops that tradition that he has to precede the coming of the Messiah, that he returns. We see that at Malachi, right? And that's fulfilled in John the Baptist for most Christians, and so you have that echo as well.
Yeah, we're going to read that, or something like that.
Yeah,
So an inheritance, the double portion, which explains why he cries out, "Father, Father,"
right?
Sort of,
right? I think so.
Verse 12.
Yeah, that he sees him as, I'm your spiritual child. Let me be the one who goes. And the fact that he sees the chariots and horsemen tell us that he has honored that, because how else are you going to know that he sees it?
Right.
In this telling of the story, he doesn't have anybody to talk to.
Right.
So.
And what kind of transition is this in the larger narrative of Kings? Something big transition going on here?
It's a handoff. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you get a story. In fact, the Elijah story in chapter 1 is a lot more like an Elisha story. It seems like an Elisha story. There's a little more violence than you normally get in an Elijah story. But Elijah killed all those Baal prophets, so I guess I can't say that. But it was, not. It is a handoff from Elijah to
authorization, sort of.
Yeah, it's a commission, if you will, and carry on for me. And Elisha does die. He actually was buried and
very conventional.
Departure. Well, but is so full of God's Spirit that when the dead person hits him, he can come back to life. So there's that.
The dead person, not Elisha, but the
dead person. Elisha was dead and bones, and when the men who were trying to hide their friend's body, when his dead body hit Elisha's bones, he came back to life.
Man, that's living.
Well, I think we ought to start testing how spirit-filled people are by throwing corpses at them, maybe, or at least maybe just animals. Not.
Well, in certain traditions, it's like, well, he's a saint because he won't decompose, right? This is in Brothers Karamazov. It's like, wait a minute, he's decomposing. I thought he was a saint.
Well, Elisha is a little more conventional. Elijah made an exit, but Elisha is a little more conventional. So.
Yeah, this is incredible.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Lots of style, lots of drama. And then pick up his mantle after this?
He does.
I seem to remember that, yeah.
He does.
Which is good, because he just ripped his own
He
clothes.
ripped his own clothes. Well, he was sad to see him go. That's an
Yes.
act of mourning.
Yes.
So
Okay.
sad to see him go. Great story.
All right, Transfiguration. I have no idea how this is going to relate to the rest of the text, but we'll see.
Keep going.
Let's trust this collection of text. All right, shall we look at Psalm 50?
Absolutely.
1 through 6? And I haven't even read further, but you can tell us whether we should or not.
Well, of course.
I'll read the text. Psalm 50, 1 through 6. The Mighty One, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes and does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire and a mighty tempest all around him. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth that he may judge his people. Gather to me faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge.
Mm-hmm.
Selah.
Selah.
Right.
We don't know what Selah
Whatever
means.
that
Sorry,
means.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are people who will tell you they know what that means, but I don't believe them. There
How could they?
There are a couple of verbs it could come from. One means to lift up, one means to bow down.
Turn cassette over at this point.
Some think it means, read it's a moment for a recitative. Some say it's a moment maybe where other passage was read. Some say it's get louder. Some say it's bow down. Some say it's raise your hands. So
Okay.
when we get to heaven, if we
Sounds
can
like
work
a
that out.
Consensus.
Yeah.
Building.
It's going to be an awkward moment in heaven when God says Selah, and half of us bow and the other
Everyone
half
does all
gets
this
up. So, we need to work that out in Revelation or something before we start singing. If we could, that'd be good. But, I always tell the students,
helpful.
I know two things about that. I don't know what it means, and nobody else does either.
Yeah,
Those
that's
are your
good
two
too.
things.
Yeah. Let's get this right, because there's this stuff about a devouring fire. Let's see if we're on the same page.
So, what do you want? You want to say? You want me to say?
Well, sounds very much cultic worship sort of
It is.
imagery here.
And in fact, more theophonic. It's a theophany.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
this very, very Sinai language here.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
where
Sinai.
devouring fire and mighty tempest all around. Yeah, absolutely. Psalm 50 is part of the Elohistic Psalter. So from Psalm 42 to 84, those psalms use primarily the name Elohim rather than the name Yahweh. So you will see more God than you will see the Lord in those psalms. All sorts of speculation as
And so
to why.
verse 1 is that God the Lord,
That is actually an occurrence of Yahweh. Yeah, I
Okay.
checked on that one.
Okay.
But the rest of them, it's God, God shines, God comes, God, it's a lot more. Whereas you would find Yahweh in other psalms. This one is primarily Elohim. People have wondered why. I mean, I've always, the convention is usually that maybe this is a northern hymn book that after the destruction of the northern kingdom got joined to the southern hymn book. That maybe they preferred Elohim in the north and Yahweh in the south, or who knows. But it does seem to represent another connection. Another collection in the Psalms, 42. But God, first of all, summons the earth, meaning the whole world, at the beginning.
right.
And then he summons the heavens and the earth in verse 4. And then he summons his faithful ones, or his chassidim. So, and he summons at the beginning, he summons the world from the rising to the setting of the sun. And that's, of course, speculation. Does that mean east to west? Which would be a logical thought. Is it a geographical reference? But most of the people that I like to read seem to think that it's a reference of time. That it's an all-day kind of reference, not a location reference. So that's
But encompassing in some way.
right, exactly. Yeah, it is encompassing in a different way, right? Again, we've got God calling the nature to witness, right? He calls to the heavens and the earth that he may judge his people. So he needs the heaven and the earth to show up so he can judge his people in front of the jury that is the heavens and the earth. Because again, when you're a monotheist, you can't call the other gods to witness. That, by the way, very similar to Deuteronomy, end of Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
And we saw in Micah 6 just a few weeks ago. Or was that last week? Or a few weeks ago?
Don't recall.
I don't remember.
It was a while.
Time has passed.
Micah. We haven't read
Time
Micah
has
in a while.
passed. So that's all interesting here. Gather to me my faithful ones, the Hebrew word chesed, the set apart, the pious ones, the ones who are part of the covenant, the ones I've loved, who are faithful, who, and it says who made a covenant. And this is one of those times when the translation literally is cut, who are cutting a covenant. That when you make a covenant in the Old Testament, usually the term is to cut a covenant. That's the way they say that. Probably a reference to what's done while you're making the covenant.
And you're cutting an animal.
You are cutting an animal, exactly, in half, right? The Genesis 15 passage is a good example of where Abraham cuts the animals and gets a list of animals from God. He cuts them in half, and then.
Do any of these have spatchcock? Who've made a covenant by spatchcock?
You know, I around Thanksgiving.
Which is an efficient way to cut.
It is. He is mocking me. I do enjoy cooking, you see, and I will occasionally spatchcock a turkey on Thanksgiving.
Which means what?
To remove the backbone and press it flat.
Yes.
Okay. And so it cooks more evenly.
I do the same.
And a little faster when you do that. So this podcast is full of all sorts of tips, not just cooking tips.
This would be the portion of the morning show where we go and fix a 20-minute meal.
We should do that. We should bring a cook in and make a meal together.
There's a nice snack mix you can make in no time flat.
Nothing like these cooking podcasts to really grab the audience. But anywho,
take the heifer and cut it in half,
and then walk between.
We've got some that have already been cut in half here for time,
for the sake of time. But
wow,
I do think it's not. I think it's important. I think in English this can look legalistic, right? Gather to me my faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. When it's not. I mean, the reflection is
people get pretty. They have strong feelings about barbecue, so I could understand legalistic.
That sense that these are the people who have entered into a covenant with me, who are living out this covenant with me, and actually this entire psalm, it's a much longer psalm, deals with what appropriate sacrifice is. I mean, at the big finish is
the rest of the psalm.
When the big finish is when God says, you know, if your sacrifice comes from thanksgiving, then I'll accept it. So that's an act of the act of sacrifice isn't impressive.
Is there some criticism of the pretense of sacrifice in the rest of the psalm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because seems like I've read this recently, but I didn't read it this week.
Yeah, sort of a condemnation of hypocrisy in this psalm as well. Because the wicked ones seem to be people who are doing the things God asked, not the people outside of Israel, but the people who would call themselves Israel, but are presuming upon the offering. So, that's always scary when the wicked are people who identify as the faithful to themselves. But in fact, so.
My faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice.
So who cut a covenant with me by sacrifice, and pass between. And the idea, particularly in Genesis, is
what is behind that?
That if you do not live up to your obligations in the covenant, that what happens to the animals will happen to you.
Like a gang initiation. Right?
Yes, I don't know how many times I've heard that used as an illustration. In fact,
the gangs of Israel,
the 12 gangs of
Sons
Israel,
of Anarchy. 12 of them.
But that you have, it's interesting because in Genesis 15, you have God, it seems, is the one who passes between the animals. So sort of telling Abraham, I'm the one who's going to be fulfilling this. And then, of course, in the very next chapter, Abraham decides to help God along rather than to trust that God would be the one who fulfills it.
Right,
the whole Hagar story.
Yeah. But it's serious stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're
joining a gang.
You're making a commitment to Yahweh, or Elohim in this case, who is
some gangs. When they get the gang tattoo, they say, "If you leave the gang, we'll come and get the tattoo." It's like, wow, it kind of drives it home.
See,
not unlike this. Okay?
I've got like 3 jokes that I should probably just keep to myself at this point. It's just better.
I can edit them out.
No, you've said that before, and then I've listened to the podcast and found out these things were not edited out.
There it is. And it becomes the title.
Exactly.
Of the podcast.
Exactly.
Why do I think gangs are going to show up?
I'm absolutely confident the title will involve gang initiations. So, anyway.
We never know the title going in.
This is true. We really don't.
We're so committed to improv.
Fortunately, it's something we can do.
Yeah, let's call it that.
So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what's happening in those 6 verses.
Can't believe you went there in those 6 verses, but okay.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, this is good. Now, it'd be interesting for you. Now, of the 4 texts, this is the one. I don't. It's harder for me to see the continuity. Although I think there's some connection to the other texts. Maybe you could point it out more as we go on.
God's appearing, right? The theophany here.
Yeah,
I mean, this is an
language.
unusual psalm because God speaks in it a lot. There's a lot of speech. This is a prophetic psalm and I'm using that term in a Old Testament biblical way. It's prophetic, not in fortune telling, which is what most people think prophetic means, but prophetic in
telling.
Exactly. Then basically, my thumbnail definition is always: a priest brings the people to God, a prophet brings God to the people.
Okay,
that's the difference in those jobs. And a prophet bringing God to the people, it's God's word that we're bringing to the people, right? And this is a text which has God's word throughout it. Most of the Psalms are our words to God that through the canonical process have become God's words to us, right?
Right.
And this is a case where specifically these are God's words to us that through the canonical process have also become God's words to us.
Okay.
So this is a very prophetic psalm. We only have the 1 verse 5 with the direct speech, but there's a lot of speech of God after this where he's condemning.
What percentage of the Hebrew Bible is God speaking?
Well, that's a good question.
Never thought about
I don't know.
And what color are the texts when they write them?
Well, they should be red,
Did he
right?
get his
I mean,
own?
if we're going to take seriously Trinity, it should be red, shouldn't it?
That's interesting because at the beginning of Revelation, there's debate on what's the red letters and what isn't because they can't figure out.
Oh, when God's speaking.
If you're not a careful reading of Revelation, you're thinking it's Jesus, but it's really God, in those first chapters. Anyway, we're digressing, but.
What, really?
Yeah.
What? And see, why is this a problem? You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean,
well, you'll miss some of the interesting, I see what
because John is being clever with the speech
it's interesting because the things that God says at the beginning of Revelation and the way God describes himself as you go on in Revelation, that's used to describe Jesus.
Okay.
So if everything is like everything's red letter at the front, it's like, no, there's no reason to believe that that's red letter. It's just God is speaking and God is showing up and there's no context for it. But as you go on, close reading, you realize, that is God. That was attributed to God earlier, and now I'm seeing that, the one coming is God's coming to his creation in the arrival of the kingdom. That happens through Jesus. So anyway,
that's very much Balcom, right? Who highlights that? Yeah. I was reading the book you recommended that was still blowing my mind when I think about that book.
Richard Balcom,
Theology of Revelation.
That's the go-to guy.
That's remarkable. That was a remarkable book.
Yeah.
The amount that he highlighted in there of Trinitarian understanding regarding that Jesus is in fact God,
right? All
throughout Revelation,
is
important.
And it's the most Trinitarian book of the New Testament.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea.
It's a lot. It's a gem.
Well, it's a natural leap from Psalm 50 to Revelation. So
beautiful segue there.
Well, hey, we got fire, devouring fires and mighty tempests.
That's right.
There's some overlap.
That's right. Gotcha. A lot of theophany sort of stuff.
Absolutely. You ready for 2 Corinthians?
Oh, no one's. It's like the Spanish Inquisition. No one's ready.
Wow, I didn't expect that reference. Okay, 2 Corinthians 4, 3 through 6. And even if our gospel is veiled, it feels as though we've jumped into something here.
Yes, we've been going consistently through 1 Corinthians, and then we've jumped into 2 Corinthians.
And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. It would be nice to know the beginning of that argument.
Yes.
In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. This is that guy who says to the Corinthians earlier, I can't talk.
I don't
good.
speak real well. I'm not Mr. Orator,
person.
So
not one of them. What do you call those word people?
Yeah, the fancy
Poets?
Speakers. Them. I'm not good like that.
So yeah,
Me don't talk
I'm
pretty.
not buying that. Not buying that at all. and a lot of midrash appropriation of Old Testament in a way that kind of explains what's going on now or appropriates it for today. It's a lot going on here.
Now, let me give you my understanding of this, and you can correct me.
Okay.
All right. So it's my understanding that 2 Corinthians represents at least the fourth letter that Paul writes to Corinth. Yeah?
Yeah, it could be the fourth. Yeah.
At least.
Because there's an ongoing correspondence.
Right. In 1 Corinthians, he talks about the earlier letter he wrote in 1 Corinthians 5:9.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2 Corinthians, he talks about the sorrowful letter that apparently isn't 1 Corinthians that seems to come in between.
And then some people say 2 Corinthians is a compilation of several letters.
Okay.
So I don't know what to do.
So this
with
is
that.
the letter I'm writing after you people finally got it together.
Now that I don't know, because I wasn't tracking with I'm in 2 Corinthians this week.
Okay.
I didn't go back and, because you know what, I never get to 2 Corinthians. It's not
in
like I
a
don't
semester.
regularly.
Yeah.
No one ever, you never get that. I get there sometimes if I have time to.
Because it's in 2 Corinthians, he said, I'm real sorry I had to write that real harsh letter, but I'm not really sorry because it actually got your attention and you did what you were supposed to do.
Right.
And so this is the makeup letter.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. And yet it doesn't seem like everything's smoothed out because there's still a fair amount of him having to apologize or do some apologetic for his ministry.
For his ministry, yeah.
Which is what this is to a degree.
And then the big apology comes at the end of 2 Corinthians, right? Where this is how I'm an apostle.
The full speech.
The full, yeah.
You want to know what the credentials of an apostle are, and
Let
then
me
he shows
show you
these absurd credentials of.
And that's the part that people think might have been the third letter, right? That 2 Corinthians is a compilation. Is that
part of it? Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's one theory. Is that here is that letter.
Okay.
So it's hard to. How do you? There's no hard evidence for this. No literal manuscripts that don't have these. So it's all
speculation.
Speculation.
Yeah.
Right. Which people love.
Well, that's how people have careers.
Right.
So.
Yes, I guess so. Yeah. And so it's both him making a case for his gospel, but also a lot of revelation as to how he understands the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just reading this yesterday and thinking, man, there's just so much here. I thought, I'm just going to spend some time. I'll just spend my, Bible reading time, devotion. I'll just spend it on 2 Corinthians because I got to slow down and chew this. And still, there's just so much here. There's so much presupposed. Plus, he's dipping into these biblical imagery, these archetypes from the Old Testament, the Moses story and the veil, and how he's reading that in a way that explains the difference between the revelation, the theophany at Sinai versus now. Maybe that's a connection there because
there you go.
The Psalm 50 is invoking that
theophany
Sinai, even though they say Zion. So these traditions are so fluid. You're like, Sinai, Zion. It's like, aren't those different mountains? Yeah, but same thing.
Wow.
So even if our gospel is veiled, and so the veil he's evoking or alluding to is the veil that Moses wore over his. And how he's reading that, it seems to be, in a way, he's both saying, we're opening our hearts and we're upfront and we're transparent and we're speaking to you in a good conscience, unlike some other ministers who remain unnamed. And
he also, verse 4 to me, has the sound of a person who's sort of encouraging that the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing, but we actually can see. I mean, so now he's kind of almost encouraging them against a world that is going to run them down in the way in which they proclaim.
So I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure. The God of this world is blinded. He's encouraging them
as a church.
They're not.
They're not
among that.
Right.
Yeah, right. And that's how he would in this scenario. He's both evoking that Old Testament story in a way, in a very novel reading, but he's also using some kind of apocalyptic categories where it almost sounds like he's dualistic, but he's not really.
Okay.
He's kind of inherited a language and a time when people talk about the God of this world versus, or the true God. And it's like, it was close. That was a good match. Well, he doesn't think that. He doesn't think there's really another competitor to Yahweh, to the God of creation. But it's a convenient way to talk about it.
Right.
It's in the atmosphere, so to speak, of of the culture. And he would go back and forth between God has blinded people to understanding things, or the God of this world, meaning the devil, or Satan, or Slewfoot, or whatever you want to say.
Scratch.
I think he actually, Scratch. I think he actually uses those phrases. But
down at the crossroads.
God of the dragon. Anywho,
break out the blues guitar in a minute.
But he wouldn't hesitate from saying people are complicit in this too.
Yeah,
and so he's all over the place.
Yeah,
this doesn't see these as contradictory.
This to me has that tone of it doesn't feel, and of course this is just feeling, right? It doesn't feel like he is correcting them the way he was in 1 Corinthians.
Yeah.
This feels more like an encouragement of the gospel to now. I don't want to say now that you've got it right, but in that level, right? Now that you sort of are thinking better, now that you got your head right.
Got your head right.
Now as you go, our gospel will be veiled, and it's not, but they can't see, and this is who you are, and proclaim Christ, and we're slaves, but you're right. I mean, there is a little bit of that defending.
There's still a little bit of that.
The defending his apostleship thing. Yeah, I mean, he's really fighting for his authority among these people.
Mm-hmm. And yet, you get so much theology.
Right.
I mean, like, wow, that's an interesting way to think about it. So, and even if our gospel is veiled, which I could turn back and say what he's talking about, but this is a dense argument, so I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
I would never get through this. It is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. So, who is the image of God? Well, that's pretty dense stuff too, particularly since you're piling on genitives, which is what we call the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. Well, those are all just case endings with no articles and no prepositions. So the people arrange those like you think about like refrigerator words on magnets. It's like people arrange these all different kinds of ways. It's wait a minute. So is the glory? They change the order and different meanings. So he really piles this stuff on.
So you could go with the light of Christ's glory and gospel.
You could do it all kinds of ways.
Wow.
You can do it all kinds of ways. There's stronger cases you could make one direction or another. But behind this is a midrash on Moses coming down the mountain. He's been in God's presence, and he is radiant, and he is shiny, and he puts a veil on, right? The new improved Moses, okay? Puts a veil on, and he's kind of riffing on that. It says, our gospel, and behind that is some thinking is, I would need to read more of 2 Corinthians because I never encountered this before, but I read someone who said, whereas if he's going back and forth, if he's thinking in dualistic categories, he's saying Moses was actually hiding that the old covenant was fading away.
I gotcha.
Okay, and that's why people can't see that. But we're showing it that there is this new covenant. We're not going to hide the fact that old covenant has gone away. So the fact that when people read the scriptures weekly and they don't see that, it means because a midrash is often or sometimes used to explain why is the state of affairs the way it is.
Right.
And so why can't people see that Christ is the revelation of God's glory? And why can't unbelieving Jews see that? And so he's using the image, the veil of Moses, saying Moses was hiding the fact that old covenant is fading away. But we're not going to do that. And but also in the other camp would be those people who are deceptive, bad ministers. Yeah. So you can make parallels that I don't think Paul wants to make between like Moses was bad, Moses was hiding something. So no, it's not it's an interesting analogy. It's not a systematic analogy.
Okay.
So you can't like say, wait a minute, what camp is Moses in? But he is. But rhetorically, he's saying here's something that's superior to Moses. Here's a superior revelation. So you end up with them. Oh, Moses is in this column with some ministers who aren't so transparent.
And then to make that leap, I mean, I don't know, we can think about how radical that leap is. I mean, Moses was the archetype for prophet. I mean, I just said that a prophet is someone who brings God to the people, and it's believed in Jewish tradition that no one brought God better than Moses. I mean, and God says this, right, in Numbers 12, other prophets I let have visions, other prophets dream dreams. With Moses I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. Moses speaks exactly what I say to you, absolutely clear, you don't misunderstand. And Paul comes along and says, see, it was veiled.
Yeah, Moses. He was always holding back. What is it with it's always about
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're wondering why he was provocative among the Jews, I mean...
And it's all contextual because, here's a surpassing revelation. I noticed that you can, if you have a candle and you have something brighter than a candle, you shine on a candle, that the flame itself casts a shadow. I mean, there's just how can a flame, how can a source of light cast a shadow? It's like... If you're in a dark room, that shadow is amazing. I mean, that light, that source of light, it's obviously it makes all the difference. But there is something more exceeding comes along. It kind of relativizes it. So in this case, it's the revelation, seeing the light of the gospel, of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Okay. Wow. So there's a lot to join there. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and that's very confessional,
right?
Language.
And it's also though the subtle dig at the
and like others,
exactly. It's that subtle dig
who proclaim themselves
exactly what they were dealing with in 1 Corinthians, right? Proclaiming Apollos, proclaiming Cephas, proclaiming Paul. No, we don't proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord,
and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. It's like, wow, that's a lot. That's interesting. If he, it's nice that he reveals how he thinks about himself. I don't know if this is all rhetorical. It's like, here's a person who has clarity about his call and what he's all about. There's no doubt. This is a vigorous personality who knows exactly what he's doing, and
has understood what Jesus was saying with, "You're going to be a leader, wash the feet of the servant." I mean, he gets that.
And he says, amidst all this boasting, it says, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake.
Right.
He would understand his ministry of the gospel is his service to others.
Yeah.
Which is his servant slave role to Christ. And sometimes the prophets were called slaves, right? Slaves of God. Yeah.
Well, Obadiah's name is servant of the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Slave of the Lord.
Yeah.
Same word.
For it is the God, I'm going to get a little more scripture here, who said, let light shine out of darkness. That's somewhere.
Early in the Bible, doesn't it say that?
Early in the Bible, as I recall, page 1 perhaps. Who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge. Oh, here's another piling up of the genitives.
Yeah.
How are we going to rearrange these
things? The knowledge of the glory of God.
Yeah, the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ.
I got to admit, when I saw this, I didn't think that these 4 verses would be as dense as it ended up being.
Dense.
This is a little deeper than I thought it would be. We've waded in to the deep end here.
It's deep when you read it in one option of the English translation, which I think is good. I think these are good. This is a good way to read it. But when you realize, there's all kinds of other ways to read this when you rearrange those genitives of
how it would have been understood when they first heard it. Yeah.
Who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And it goes on with this imagery of mirrors, and we're looking in a mirror, and we're beholding, unlike Moses, whose face is veiled, we're looking at as though in a mirror, but we're seeing the face of Christ, and in beholding that, we are transformed to become like that face, which is like looking in a mirror. And it's really something. But he stays with the face and the glory and the transformative character of this revelation that we get through Christ. So, it's really something hard to drop into. For a couple of
4 verses. Just go ahead and drop in there.
And yet it fits beautifully with these texts.
The Transfiguration
and
Sunday. Theophany.
Yeah,
because we have Jesus appearing here. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Keep moving.
How about Mark?
And we're walking.
And we're walking. Mark 9. We have leapt away from the Sermon on the Mount with I'm glad to set aside for a week because the conviction is just piling upon conviction there.
Rough sledding.
So Mark 9 is where we are now. Chapter 9, verses 2 through 9.
A lot of action this week.
Yeah, things are happening. 6 days later, once again, we've leapt into a story. Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Glad Moses finally made it to the promised land. Then Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, because you would want to split. He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. I love how he didn't know what to say, but he managed to muster a sentence or two, didn't he? Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, This is my son, the beloved, listen to him. Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead.
Okay, so self-explanatory after reading the first 3 scriptures, essentially.
Pretty obvious. I don't know how much we need to unpack there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You say you have questions?
What does transfigured mean? That's all I want to know. Just answer that, and we can close the podcast. I just need to know.
Let me ease into that.
Oh, dang.
Let me ease into that.
First of all, it's a Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles. Everybody, it's a remembrance.
Give us a little bit of background.
It's a remembrance of the wandering in the wilderness every year, where you would not stay in your house, but you would go out and you would make a tent, and you would stay there and sleep for a week doing that. And so that's what Peter's referring to. It's like, well, if we're going to be out here celebrating this holiday, and Moses and Elijah are going to need a tent. So you want me to make a tent for them?
And by extension, or connected with that, would be that these people are dwelling in the wilderness, and God is with them in the midst of them.
Right,
so
exactly.
Some theophany stuff there.
That's true.
That's a more of a natural.
Because he traveled with them in the wilderness when they went. Yeah.
Peter, not knowing what to say, did say something connected.
He did.
Maybe still not with full knowledge of what is going on.
Yeah.
When we teach this, we go through this probably in all surveys of the New Testament, and then I go through Gospels, and I say, so what happened on the Mount of Transfiguration? I usually say, and there's a hint in the name of the mountain. There's a hint on what happened if you're reading closely. And it is now called the Mount of Transfiguration. What does transfiguration mean? Well, in John, there's no transfiguration.
Well, in John, there's not much anything.
Yeah, but why? Because if you think about it, this is in his wheelhouse. Transfiguration is the reality of Jesus' identity and character shines for his glory shines through.
Okay.
And so John, that's not there. It's one of those many things that, like, wait a minute, these are one of those main,
like baptism
points, like baptism and stuff with bread and wine and stuff, Why isn't that there? It's like, well, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's one point where Jesus, really one point in the story. Maybe he's transfigured in the ascension, but I can't remember if that's the case or not. But there's a point in his ministry where the reality shines through. His glory shines through, okay? Whereas in John,
that's from the beginning.
That's every page.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's from the incarnation is a manifestation of his glory. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory is the only begotten of the Father. So
it's only transfiguration all the time in John.
It's glory all the time. Okay?
All transfigured.
So the first miracle he does, he says he did this to show his glory. So you're to understand that he's always and everywhere revealing his glory. So he doesn't need a Mount of Transfiguration. Whereas in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's more hidden. There's a misunderstanding of who Jesus is. So there's this point,
especially in Mark. Right, nobody gets it in Mark.
Right.
The only one, except the Roman centurion, is the only one who gets it.
No one gets close. If you read this in Matthew, Peter gets it more.
Right.
Peter's not depicted quite as much of a knucklehead as he is here.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
So less less of that.
Okay.
Less of the Stooges.
So we wouldn't say Jesus led the Three Stooges up to the mountain on a high mountain.
Right. And they're twisting each other's noses with pliers and what coconut sounds on their nuggets. Yeah. But that's kind
we seem to have moved from the glory of Christ.
That's kind of the depiction of disciples in Mark, though.
That's true.
Wouldn't be that far. I mean, you could be, have a Stooges film going and narrating over some of the things they do. He doesn't pull any punches, and they just never seem to get it. And they don't until the end. Well, and even in the end, they don't get it.
Right. They don't ever get it.
Because even the women disciples leave the tomb and
they go away sad.
Afraid.
Yeah, they go away afraid. Didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's only the angel or the mysterious young man in the tomb announces the good news. So, anyhow, here's this point, and it is adjacent to, he's already revealed that he will suffer and die.
Right.
So only at this point, just prior to this.
That's right. The immediately before this is the who did they say that I am?
Right. And the second one is like, don't tell anyone this until after the Son of Man is risen from the dead. What?
Yeah. Keep it a secret.
Yeah. So this is reminiscent of his ascension. This is a foreshadowing of what will happen after his death and suffering. So it's a glimpse of him accomplishing all that is accomplished in his death and resurrection and ascension. So there's before this, I think there's a reference to some of you are standing here who won't die until they see the coming of the kingdom of God, which is another way to say, oh, this is kind of a foreshadowing of what that looks like in its fullness, not in its hidden, mysterious, unexpected manifestation in Jesus and his ministry. There were some things about the kingdom of God that were how people expected. He's healing, the blind are seeing, he's raising people from the dead. On the other hand, there's this unexpected manifestation. So the kingdom of God is like a tiny little seed. It's like, that's not what I was expecting. And these more subtle and mysterious, unexpected.
This is the Revelation 5 moment, or that moment of the fullness here and what it looks like. And,
and this is the
kingdom has come.
The veil
a
is
glimpse
being pulled
of
back, and you see the reality as the glory shines through. And what sounds like a laundry detergent commercial.
It does.
Dazzling white.
Dazzling white, such that no one can bleach them.
Wow.
Yes, I saw that.
Little glimmer trademark. Wow.
And Elijah and Moses, you want to speak to them?
Good spokespeople.
When I need my robes dazzlingly white.
Well, like you're saying, Elijah didn't die, and Moses, well, we're not so sure. God said he buried him, but, there's this tradition that maybe
there was a tradition that he didn't. That's true. There is the assumption of Moses is something people did.
It's like, I'm not so sure.
Now, the rabbis believe that Moses died because God kissed him. That's how he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that he was, he's 3 generations old. His eyes had not dimmed. His vigor had not abated, as the Old Testament says. So he didn't need to watch commercials during the sporting events. And he dies and God buries him. But there is a tradition that says
he didn't need to call his doctor.
He did not need to call a doctor, and his vigor had not abated, which is the translation we read in church for he didn't need to call his doctor to see that he was healthy enough. And so there is this clear, his mission was done. It wasn't that he was infirmed. It was that he'd taken people as far as he could take them, so it was time to move on. And
who does this Moses guy think he is? Tom Brady?
Yeah, and the Bible is clear that he died, but there is tradition that actually God just took him, is what happened. Yeah. That he kissed and brought him on home, and so he.
Moses, are they gone? Are they gone? Okay.
Come on this way. You don't have to. You have to go. Yeah. So there was the assumption of Moses is something that was talked about. So you're right. So this.
So the assumption of Moses is the assumption that he died?
No. The assumption as in he was assumed into heaven.
Ascended.
As he ascended, yes. And that was a pretty common thing to happen to holy people. They ascended.
Yeah. And so Elijah is expected to show up and usher in the arrival of the Messiah. And so Malachi 3 and 4 talk about that.
Right.
Anything about Moses in the canonical tradition, or does he serve that role in the extra?
See, that's the thing. I mean, on one hand, Moses makes sense to me because he's the archetype for prophet,
right?
and then Jesus is the incarnate Word. So, I mean, that makes some sense. Elijah, for me, I mean, I wouldn't ever think, he's the representative for prophet. I mean, maybe you go with Elijah as a prophet and Moses as a lawgiver, but they thought of Moses as prophetic because he brought the Word. So
most Christian commentaries on it, you don't get too far above devotional. It's like, well, that's representing the law and the prophets. They make that distinction quite like we do.
Elijah wasn't a written prophet.
Right.
He was, and Moses was the prophet. So, I mean, these are two prophets. When the people read the story,
also two witnesses, two Jesuses, and then Deuteronomy 18 says, "In the last days, a prophet like Moses will arise," and God says, "Listen to him," and that's what God says here.
Right, that's right.
Listen to him.
That could be that's a powerful reference there. Yeah.
Right.
That here you have two prophets that are passing the baton in a way.
So, interesting thing about the handing off from Elijah to Elisha.
Oh, there you go. There's a nice. There's a connection.
We should have a bell
when we make the connections between texts. Well done. Very good, sir.
We have several points by now.
Yeah. So, okay. One for Moses, one for Elijah.
Yeah, and there's still traditions that do that. I was visiting a friend. They said, "What is that on the porch above?" It was a 3-flat in Chicago. And it's like, well, that's the rabbi who lives upstairs. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, that's his dwelling for tabernacles. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A lot of the apartments in Jerusalem, you'll see wire frames out on the patio that they then close in for tabernacles when they want to observe that holiday.
And so a lot of traditional Sinai theophany imagery here. The cloud overshadowed them, and the cloud there came a voice. "This is my son, the beloved." All right, sounds very much like the baptism. All right, listen to him. Still probably a combination of Psalm 2 and suffering servant language, but probably an echo of Deuteronomy 18.
Yeah.
When the prophet arises like Moses, you need to listen to him. And also in this context, does not mention anything about Elijah and Moses. This is my son. Listen to him. Okay?
Right. That's a good point.
And that point would be, and then they looked around. They saw no one, but only Jesus. Okay, so pretty emphatic. It's kind of like a lot of space is given to John at the beginning of all the Christian Gospels, and it's like it's someone preparing the way and pointing to Jesus, but also the surpassing quality of Jesus in relation to that person. It clarifies the relationship, as is God here, the relationship between Elijah and Moses.
I hadn't considered that you have Elijah and Moses and Jesus, and God says, "This is Jesus, listen to him." And then Moses and Elijah are gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. I wonder if they would have heard that.
Which is an interesting contrast if you read 2 Corinthians 4, which we just did.
Yeah.
This comparisons to sometimes to the surpassing revelation of Jesus. Even as incredible as the revelation to Moses was, here's something.
Yeah, and I think that's something you don't want to undersell. I mean, the revelation of Moses was the pinnacle, and then there's like, oh, this is better. Yeah, that's
if you haven't gone through that, that's it's funny in scholarship, paradigm come and go, and if you haven't lived through a paradigm, you don't really realize what the new paradigm had the consequence and the revolutionary nature. If you've just grown up with the new paradigm, you really don't get what that means. The immensity of that's world changing, and that's often how we encounter the revelation of the Christian Testament. We haven't seriously taken the Old Testament seriously. We haven't lived that reality. Even though it's the church's Bible, we've relativized it in a way that simply is not meant to be relativized.
Very Marcion. I mean, very early church heresy with mean God in the Old Testament, and no, not really. And it's actually it's amazing. And then what Jesus does is more amazing in that same tradition.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed listening. Make sure and like us on Facebook and send us an email at, what's the email address again?
At readinginchurch@gmail.com.
Okay. And make sure, and if you're listening on iTunes, take a moment and leave a review. We'd love to
Yep.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
So.
If you hate it, we need to know.
Actually, you don't. If you hate it, you don't have to leave a review.
Right.
Send out an email. Don't tell other people you hate it. Tell other people that you like it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. So, have you been telling people you hate the podcast?
No.
Oh, good.
No,
good. I'm just checking.
No, I just want people to be honest.
Okay.
We'll end this charade right now, if that's the case. No, we won't.
Not a chance.
We have too much fun.
This is a good point. All right. Well, you have a great week, and thanks for listening.
Happy Transfiguration Sunday.
And also with you.
Also with you.
Blessings.
Amen.